Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the country. I I just gave producer Martha a bit of a fright because I wasn't paying attention to her machinations, shall we say, on messaging. I was too busy reading the chat, as you do. I've got a slightly different camera. I'm on 4K now, so you can see all of me. And I haven't shaved for a couple of weeks, so I do look like I've been living on a desert island for a while. I'm sorry about that, but I literally have been so busy I haven't had time to shave my beard or anything like that. And the green screen is packed in a box somewhere. I have no idea. So my chair is a bit glitchy, but apart from that, hopefully the sound is okay. I did have a note from now. I did make a note of who it was who told me this. It was Mike Smuda, who works in TV, and he said to get a lapel mic. And actually, I have got a lapel mic, a nice one with a little fuzzy bit on, you know, like the cool things that you like when you get interviewed on TV or something like that. But I just literally haven't had a chance to get it ready. So I've got my standard mic. It is in an acoustic enclosure, but I still have not enough stuff on my office walls and things like that to absorb the booming sound, shall we say. So today's session, the actual slide should be relatively short, so we can take a few minutes to say hi to everybody. I really appreciate you all coming along. I get a lot of emails from people saying, "Oh, I watched your session," and from people I wouldn't expect to watch the sessions as well. You know, quite you know, advanced Delphi people, and yet these sessions really are intended for beginners and improvers, shall we say. So I really appreciate everybody coming along. I you know, it's only an hour, but even so, it's still a bit of an effort to put in. Let's say hello to a few people. Hi from Fort Collins in Colorado, and that is from Dave. Hello, Dave. Thanks for joining us. And Peter. Oh, I'm not going to try and pronounce your last name, Peter. I'm sure Piaszkieszny. I don't know. I should know. My stepfather is Polish, and I know how to say "dzień dobry" properly and things like that. But I'll defer to an expert. But dzień dobry to Poland. I hope you're all doing well. Helios rather cheekily said, "I hope this is going to be the correct session." And Peter said, "Knowing in, not at all." And actually, it is the correct session because Martha made sure that it was correct this time. And my eyes are a little bit red because I was eating. Brits will appreciate this. I was eating a Bombay Bad Boy pot noodle earlier on, and I managed to get some of the hot sauce in my eye and nearly blinded myself. I thought it was going to be a problem. Oh, look. Yeah. Hi, Thomas. Thomas is in Austria. That's very nice. Who else have we got? Oh, yes. I already said hello to Paul, but Paul in a soggy London. I'm a London boy myself. I was born in Woolwich. And actually, Marco Cantu was telling me earlier on in a meeting that he was at the Greenwich Meridian and took a photograph of the Meridian. And I was born just a little, probably about a mile away from the Greenwich Meridian. So I really am a London boy. I left there when I was a young kid, but even so, London is my spiritual birthplace, so to speak, an actual birthplace. What else have we got? And I did say, well, that's soggy London is typical for the weather. Dave says it's gloomy where he is. It's 54. Well, it's you know, I'm in Dallas. I've moved. I'm a bit more into the more lively part of Dallas. I was living out in the sticks a bit before, out in Lavon, for those of you from the DFW area. I know there are a few of you, but I've now moved nearer to Frisco, which is one of the largest, fastest growing cities in the United States. So it's just still in the DFW area, but just a bit more surrounded by life rather than goats and winery. It was very nice to be by a winery, but not that I could ever afford to drink there. Their bottles are one of horrendous. But there you go. Nigel says hello. Hello, Nigel. I spoke to Nigel on email about various bits and bobs. He's going to miss it because he's on his way home from work in the rain. And there's quite a few Brits, isn't there? Stephen Bullis, who I'm glad you made it, Stephen, because for some reason our links never seems to work for Stephen. I know a few people have had problems. It's not just Stephen, but the links that we're going to look into why it's not working for him, because we tried to narrow it down so he had one registration for all of the series rather than 25 registrations or whatever it was. So Paul's said he's got a friend in Duluth, and if summer fell on a weekday, they declared a holiday. Yes. It's a little joke about Duluth only having a summer once a year. And Alex is in Champaign, Illinois. Yeah, my wife was born not far from there as well. She was born and bred in Illinois. She grew up in Peoria, Illinois. So there you go. And Boyan's here again. Hello, Boyan. We're doing the IoT stuff next week. A small confession to make. I have found my I'm trying not to freak out my dogs in the office here, but I have managed to get my see the green screen's not showing it very well, but I have actually got next week we are going to, will it show up? Yes, it will. We're going to actually build a working checkout, and I'm going to show you how to use Delphi to trigger a cash draw and drive a receipt printer if and when I find my receipt printer. And we're also going to try and get a robot to do a bit of sword fighting if and when I find the robot, because again, my whole house is packed up into boxes and I can't find absolutely anything, which is a bit annoying. I know I should have been more prepared, but I wasn't. And Dave Schugel says hello as well. So, but anyway, Boyan, Mytoff Software, if you're going to do anything with Internet of Things, and we definitely are next week, Boyan's site, Mytoff Software, is the place to go. It's got absolutely everything you can want. Okay, and Dave says hi as well. Okay, so let's do some slides. Otherwise, you'll just listen to me talking forever, and nobody will want that. Let's see where you can get my screen up. Share a screen, pick the right one in. Which screen do we want? We want that one. And I should go down in the little window down there, and then I'm going to turn my camera off so you can hear me, but not necessarily see me, but I'm sure you'll live without it. Like so. Okay, right. Let's see if I can make this a bit smaller, because I normally have 3 screens, and I decided to go to a 2-screen setup. But I've made a discovery that means I cannot see the search. Oh, and there's a load of other people saying hello as well. Hector from Laredo in Texas. Hi, Hector. I've not been to Laredo yet. Marco Keys, Marco G from GDK Software saying hello as well. And it's raining in the Netherlands, of course. Europe is full of it. Peru, and just loads of people. So we'll get back to you later, because like I say, this presentation is fairly short. So today we're going to talk about saving and remembering settings and options the right way. And what do I mean by the right way? I just mean a way that's probably going to work for all of your apps, not just Windows or something like that. And it was actually prompted by an example that I'll show you during the slides of someone saving settings in the most bizarre way. And I actually asked them why they were doing it that way, and they said that's the only way they knew how, which was slightly terrifying. So we'll come to their example in a moment. But who am I? Just in case you don't know, and I know most of the regulars here know who I am. I am Ian Barker, and I'm the Embarcadero Developer Advocate. You can email me at ian.barker@embarcadero.com. And please do. I welcome you to email me if you've got anything you want to talk about to do with Embarcadero as the company or the products, good or bad. If you've got suggestions for features that you think we should have, if you think we've done something really ridiculously bad, let me know. I mean that. We would prefer the whole truth, because what we want is to try and produce the best. I'm not going to say the best product we possibly can, because that's always the goal, but we're trying to improve and make sure that you people out there, you guys and girls, or whatever you want to call yourselves, are getting satisfaction from the product, and the only way we can do that is by listening to you and making sure that you have someone you can get in touch with. And I give you my email every week because I really genuinely want you to contact us. I don't know of any other company that does this. I'm pretty certain that even though Scott Hanselman, for example, from Microsoft, is very good and does give out his contact details as well, it's uncommon for large companies like Microsoft, and they are bigger than us, or Apple, to respond directly to emails. If you email me, I will respond. And if I don't know the answer to a question, I'll put you in touch with someone. I'm not there to give you technical support. There are people way better than me at it. But if you do want to get in touch, if there's something, about Rad Studio or Delphi or C++ Builder or any of the other things like Rad Server that you want to talk about, then get hold of me and email me and tell me. And if you want to know who I am and what I do, then go to about.me/Ian Barker. The slide link that you just saw there is currently it will go to the products page, but it will eventually go to the replay of the products. Where are we? Well, we're nearly at the end of this particular little run of webinars. And the option, the one that we've arrived at today, is saving and remembering settings and options the right way. That's today. And next week, we're going to make stuff. We build a sword fighting robot, hopefully, and our own grocery store checkout for sure, because I've got all the bits, and a low-ra radio. I've tried to order one of these, and the first one I ordered was out of stock, so I'm not entirely 100% sure I can make this work. But if I can, we will be having a LoRa or low-ra radio. And we're not stopping after this. I'm taking a pause because I'm actually going to be at the Delphi Summit in the second week of June. And in fact, the Delphi Summit, I'm going to give you more details about that in a minute, but I do need to prepare for that, and I can't do everything all at once. Someone's asking me, Peter said, if you could explain briefly what does a developer advocate do? I'm just going to click on this for a second. You have married designers in Embarcadero. Right, so I'm not quite sure what he means by that, but I can tell you what a developer advocate does. My job is to be in the middle of what the company wants to explain and what the users and customers, or whatever we want to refer to ourselves as, their point of view. And I'm there to explain the benefits of the products, the plus points, and why you would want to use Rad Studio, and also to make clear new features and things like that. But I'm also there to appear at events, like I was just at the Australian Delphi user group, and answer questions live, and to go to things like the Delphi Summit and a few other things that are happening, and turn up and represent the company. That is my job. I am there as one of the faces of the company, and I listen to what you have to say, and I make sure the right people in the company listen, your voice is heard. And I am relatively senior in the company, so I do get to talk to pretty much anybody I want. There are no ivory palaces or something like that. I will go and talk to whoever needs to hear things. And I don't get to boss people around, but I am relatively senior, and people do listen to what I have to say. I'm not there to bully our own people. That's ridiculous. And I'm not there to bully the customers. I am there to be a little bit of a wedge between everybody, so that you've got someone you can talk to. You've got a face that you can put against the company and get in touch. That's what I do. I hope that makes sense. Right, so let's carry on with the slides. So sword fighting robot and Microsoft software, and all of these webinars. If you've missed one, don't worry. If you open up the IDE and look at the welcome page, if you haven't turned it off, if you have, turn it back on again, and you'll see a Learn tab. And all these webinars, all of the things that you've seen from January onwards, right up until now and into the future, will appear in the Learn tab. And that's why they're short little chunks of info, so that you can get an idea of what's going on. And while we're talking about learning things, Are you going to the Delphi Summit? This is kind of a plug for the Delphi Summit. There are some other ones going on. There was one in London, I think it was yesterday or Friday. I'm not entirely sure. I was a bit out of touch. That was run by Grey Matter. This particular one, DelphiSummit.com, is run by GDK Software, one of our tech partners. And I think Barnston are involved, and I think Softicom, another tech partner, involved as well. But GDK are kind of the primary drivers of it. And if you can make it, it's in Amsterdam on June the 14th and the 15th. Everybody who's everybody will be there. And I apologize to the people that can't make it, because I know what that feels like. Plenty of times when I lived in the UK, there would be summits and conferences that I just couldn't go to, and it was painful. And I understand that, and I'm sorry, and we will try and make sure that we do some more around the world. But if you can make it to Europe, go to the Delphi Summit if you can afford to, and view all the topics. Go to that website and see what's there. People that are coming include myself. I'll be there for both days, and I will be doing some live broadcasts from there as well. Some streams to kind of replace what's going on at the moment. Jim McKeith will be there, and Jim and I are doing the keynote opening. If you want to understand what the keynote opening is about, I would advise you to watch some episodes of Star Trek, because Jim and I have cooked up a little bit of a ruse. As you probably know from Jim and I in the past, we like to have fun with these things. We don't want to bore you to death. And so as we are the opening speakers, we're going to make that first speech a little fun, first talk a little fun. Marco Cantu is there. Can't promise that he'll be doing crazy stuff, but he will be there and presenting the session. Ray Konopka, very well known. Olaf Monian, very good developer. Dr. Gary Jensen, the expert on FireDAC and all things FireDAC, will be there. Carlos Añez, Barnston will be there. One of the big distributors, resellers, I believe, and probably put them down there, but they are kind of the European face. Andrea Raimondi, he's going to do a great session. Christoph Schneider, Patrick Quist is going to talk about Linux Delphi services, which is very interesting. Dr. Bob Schwart will be there, if you know Schwart, Dr. Bob Schwart, or Schwart, I don't know how to pronounce it. Also famous from Dr. Bob 42, then he's going to be there. Fabrizio Bitti from BitTime, he's doing a talk. Frank Lauter, a very good friend of mine, is going to be talking about MVVM. Richard Hatherall, also another good friend of mine, is going to do a talk about, I think, Amazon services and AWS services. And we're actually going to do a series on that when we come back from this conference. And I'm told that the London event was last Thursday on the 18th. And just to finish up, my final talk, because I'm doing two, is called What to Do If You're Old, Ugly, and Everything is Annoying. So if that doesn't get you interested, I don't know what will be. It's really just talking about, what it's like to be a developer in the age of these kind of influencers and people who are Instagram famous and apps that get all the limelight, but actually a load of crap. I shouldn't say crap, I suppose, but anyway, too loud, said it. A load of rubbish, yes, and yet they get famous. And we're going to talk about what to do to combat that. So that's what my talk is about. Right. So saving settings. Let's get to the old basis of what we're actually talking about. Well, saving settings in this modern day and age is harder than it looks. Back in the day, you could pretty much create a file and store your settings any way you felt like and retrieve it. And it would work, because basically the only game in town was Windows. And that meant that you could use Windows API. In fact, you didn't have to worry about any API calls. You could just use standard Pascal, which if you didn't know, that's what you were doing, and save your settings. By saving your settings, what we're really talking about is remembering things like, if you go to a page and it says, remember me, and you click on a little checkbox, and the next time you go back to that page, that login screen, it remembers who you are and puts your username in, and you just have to confirm your password. That means it's persisted something, it's saved something. Likewise, it could be that you're talking about saving where you are on the screen. If we've got multi-monitor setup, which is extremely common nowadays, then you want to make sure that you save the correct screen location and that you've taken into account DPI settings and things like that. So it's a lot harder than it used to be, and actually it's a lot harder to get right than it looks, but actually quite simple once you're doing it. Things you shouldn't do. This is one of the things you should never do. And there are lots of reasons why you shouldn't do this. It is backwardly compatible with Turbo Pascal, almost, in the sense that what you're doing here is you've got a text file, which is a class, and you're assigning that file to some port path, and you're saving your settings.dat. You're resetting it, which means you're opening it ready to do something with, and you're writing out your settings and doing it in a very bizarre way. Now, you might say, no one ever does that, Ian. Unfortunately, the reason for this webinar is because I actually found a customer who was doing exactly this. I mean, exactly. Now, this particular customer, I'm not going to call them out and embarrass them because I'm not an evil monster, but they were pretty good. They knew what they were doing in general and in other directions, but this particular piece of code actually really threw me because I wasn't expecting to see it. Do not do this. For a start, it's the hard way of doing everything, and secondly, there are many things that are wrong with it. Better is to have used an ini file, a TINI file, and I'm going to guess there are quite a lot of you out there that are using ini files, and if you're not, you could do. There's no reason why you shouldn't use an ini file. Calling it a .dat file is a bit weird. Normally it's my settings.ini or something like that, but you could still do that. It would still be possible to save an ini file, because the actual ini file doesn't care what you've called it as long as you've called it something. And it is better, and actually it does a try finally, so it doesn't leave a hanging ini file instance there where it says my bad settings. It doesn't leave it hanging and dying. It will still work. But what's wrong with it? Well, the first thing is, in this day and age, you cannot do this. Okay, and the thing that you cannot do is use a hard-coded path for anything. And the reason that you can't use a hard code, and by the way, that even applies to Windows. And the reason it applies to Windows is, if you're looking at the Microsoft Build Conference, which has been on just recently, and I think it's still ongoing, you will find that the move is towards your storage, your hard drive, not being drive C anymore, as it's always been for most of the lifetime of Delphi. But actually becoming something more virtual. And in fact, these slides that I'm showing at the moment are actually being pulled off of the net. They're actually off a cloud. And I've got a very fast connection. I've got a 2.4 gigabyte fiber optic line, so I'm very lucky. But even so, the way that Windows caches things, you can't really tell that it's coming from a cloud, because it brings it down locally and off you go, you're reading it. But storing things in hard-coded paths is not going to work coming up, and it doesn't work in most instances now. If you think that you're saving to your documents folder and you're cleverly opening your Explorer, looking at what the path is for your documents folder, and then hard coding that because it's a lot easier for you to do, you're in for a shock, because that path is virtualized by Windows. It's completely fake. And the same with the settings directory, that is completely fake as well. And in fact, most of this really cropped up when Windows Vista came out. From Windows Vista onwards, there was a thing called UAC, user access control, and that made it so that files were not always where you thought they were. And actually, if you use the BDE, the Ball and Database Engine, which you really shouldn't, as I told you in my last session about databases, the BDE, by default, it will not store the database data where you think it is. It's actually storing it somewhere else. If you're trying to store it in a program files folder, it will actually store it in a virtual store. and you'll end up with corruption sooner or later. And that's one of the big problems with the BDE. Okay, so the biggest problem there, more than anything else, is the hard-coded path and the fact that it's using platform-specific paths. So if you want this app to suddenly start working on a Mac or start working on iOS or start working on Android, you're going to fail straight away, and not for necessarily the obvious reasons. You might say, well, I knew about the backslashes being the wrong way, but actually there's a lot more to it than that. So what is wrong? Well, it's the hard-coded paths and the platform-specific paths, neither of which are going to work on what's the word I'm looking for? A multi-device application, so a FireMonkey application. But even if you're using VCL and doing things that way on using Wine under Linux, it's still not going to work. So the way to do it, which is better, but it's not 100% better, is you can use platform agnostic paths. And what you're doing there is you're basically asking the operating system, please tell me what the right path is. And I've got some conditional code there. You see the blue. This is a Rad Studio 12.1. Actually, the code was taken off. And so instead of just getting the file name for the settings, I'm actually written a little function. Hello to Peter in Luxembourg. Peter Pan, he's always here. I'm actually creating a function that returns the settings file. Now, if it's a Mac OS, I do one specific way of doing things, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Anything else, and by anything I mean iOS, Android, and Windows and Linux, if I instead say get the home path, under Windows, it will return a path like you see in the green comment there. See kind of /users, /username, so it will be enb, /appdata, /local, etc. Okay. And I'll tell you where to look this up and find out what actually gets returned, because it does vary depending on the version of operating system, and also things like whether your company has got a network administrator who's a bit of a kind of evil or clever, depending on your perspective. Network administration might have actually virtualized some of your folders, like your desktop folder, away to a share drive or something like that on the network. Mac OS, weirdly enough, the right function to use is get library path, and it's just because Mac happens to be Unix, I think BSD originally based, and it's not quite like Windows or Linux, and wants to store things in a library, but everything else works using the home path. And so what I do there is I've got a function that takes the result of whatever the conditional compilation is. And yes, Edwin is talking about using tpath combine here instead of adding two strings together. Yes, I didn't want to make that's a very good point. There is a tpath.combine function. The reason I didn't put that in was because it made the code a little bit difficult to understand for people. I do actually talk about the tpath functions later, but instead of adding the strings together, you should use tpath combine. I'm doing this just so it was easier to explain. So tpath, get the directory separator character, and so on Windows this is a slash, and on Unix it's a different type of slash, and that's a very common thing. I'm also then getting the file name of the executable name, and I'm removing the extension of it. So if it's application.exe, then it will just return application. And if it's called myapplication.exe, then it will return my application, whatever. Now, you could change that line that says change file extension to anything you liked, as long as it was consistent and you knew that it was going to be unique. Given the way that we're going to return this folder, it should be unique for this version of this app. So if I've got multiple applications installed with the same name, they're all going to look at the same settings, so you might want to do that differently. There are ways of getting GUIDs, for example, and storing in a GUID, but this starts to get a bit nasty. Adding the directory separator and then saying result. Okay, now you might say, oh, that's great, yeah, that's going to work. And if I then go and say if I show a message to show what the path is, it actually comes back and says /users /in /app data /roaming /settings test1. That was my little app, and that's all well and good, isn't it? Perfect. You can Nigel Armstrong has made it. Hi, Nigel. And it looks good. You know, there's a path for the settings folder, and it means that I could store other things in there. I could store snapshots of data, or I could store you know, screenshots, or you know, camera images if you were doing some kind of private camera app or something like that. Whatever I wanted, I could store it in there. But that's not a good way of doing it, because if you run the app, the code that I showed you earlier on, you'll actually get an error. And the reason is that I've got that path there, but I haven't actually created the settings test1 folder. And so my little settings.ini file goes beep and explodes, which is not ideal. And you know, I'll get an exception. So what I can do is actually use force directories. And if you're not familiar with this command, what this does is it takes whatever path for your file that you've got, and it will recursively create them. So if I've got something like /users /enb /app data /local /temp /temp2 /temp3 /settings, it would actually make all of those folders that didn't exist. It's recursive. It's pretty great, and forces it so that you end up with the folder existing. Now, in the little example code that I've shown there, if that doesn't work for whatever reason, then I raise an exception. I'm not a big fan of doing things like that. I'd rather actually show meaningful user error messages and then gracefully deteriorate, shall we say. So if I couldn't make my settings folder in that particular area, then I would choose another folder like the users documents folder, because again, if you write an app for some corporates, some big companies, you'll find that the places that you're allowed to write in are actually a lot narrower than you might expect. And you would say, well, I should always be able to write to the home path. Yeah, but weirdly enough, some people lock that down and they say the only place you can store some settings are in the users documents folder. Crazy, I know, but that's the way it works. What you should probably do is actually have a preference that you would then store the settings in a particular area and have somewhere that you can read that from. So if we add that code in, then what does it look like? Well, here's an example of reading and saving to an ini file. Okay, and it is actually using that home path feature that I told you about earlier on, and then creating a file called settings.ini. And someone's asking questions about what's the better ID, Visual Studio, Delphi, Python, or SlickEdit. Well, you know, it just depends on what you're doing, doesn't it? If you're using Delphi, then the Rad Studio ID is probably the best one to use. But anyway, back to the code. So what does it look like? It looks like that. So you can see where I'm creating my ini file. I'm using a modern Delphi way of doing things, which is I'm having inline variables. Those came in 11.3, I think. So I can create the variable and off I go. Now I would go out of scope because it's local. And our person says, again, nothing understanding source code. Why? I don't know what your question is, and I don't understand why you don't understand. It's fine. Probably need to go and start. You probably need to, yeah, exactly. As Doug says, it depends. I think I would recommend that you go away and learn some basics of software development code before you can understand the code. Anyway, so what I've got there is, in my example, is I'm just saving whether the dark mode is on or not. Because as you know, I'm a big fan of making sure you support dark mode. And so I have a Boolean value that just says whether I've turned the toggle switch for dark mode on and off. Okay, I'm going to show you that code running in a second. Let's just talk about some of the key classes that you need to go and learn about. There's more to it than this. There are lots of different ways of saving settings. For example, you could save your settings in a SQLite database. This is a very common thing that people do. You could also store it in the registry, which I don't recommend, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And you could also store it in some of the key value stores that are available and then retrieve them. If you're writing a cloud app, then generally speaking, you probably want to store it in the default, a default known section for the cloud app. So the cloud app connects and off it goes. If you're writing a web app, then you're probably going to store it in some cookies. And that information that you store in the cookies needs to be something that is not confidential. So, for example, if you are saving a password, don't put it in a cookie. The only time you can ever put it in a cookie is if it's a one-time password that you're using there and then, and there's something you need to validate. I don't know why you would do that, because even then you're opening up your app for things like what are known as session hijacking, where someone hijacks a browser session. So if it's a session ID cookie or something like that, then they can grab it. But lots of different places to do it. But the very basic one for Windows programmers, and I know that a lot of you that are watching this, because I get feedback and we get some questions and answers, are Windows programmers, then system.ini files, just click on your app and type in uses system.ini files, and then you've got access to the ini file, which is what I was using. This is the OG of setting storage. And if you don't know what the ini file is, that means you probably use a Mac or something like that. But it is basically a text file. It has a section, which is, whatever you want to call it, that's surrounded by square brackets. And then underneath that section are some settings. A value name equals an equal sign, and then whatever that value is. That's how it works. Dead easy. Same with tmem.ini file. The only difference between tmem.ini file and a tini file is that it actually reads everything into memory at once as a chunk. It caches it, and then it saves it on the device when it needs to. Usually when you're actually destroying the tmem.ini file, or when you're explicitly saying .update file, there's a method for it. Underneath, some of the other types of ini files will actually use mem.ini files as their basis. All of them, I think, descend from tcustom.ini file, but it's the same thing. It has some features and functions to do some cool things. Another key class that you probably want to know about is system.win.registry, and there is a thing called a tregistry ini file. Now, be careful, because there is a thing called treg.ini file, which actually is a outdated and old version of registry.ini file. It's usually only for Windows 95 and is much more tied to Windows 95. Tregistry.ini file is still wrapping the Windows API, but it does it in a slightly better way, and it just abstracts the ini file so that you're still using ini file commands, but you can you're saving it to the Hive, which is what the Windows registry is called, and then from there. And as I said before, you could use tregistry and end up with writing a piece of code that looks like this. So it's very, very similar, except what you're doing is you are opening a registry key, and in this case HKey local machine is the place to go. You're going to write the key, you open the key, blah blah blah, to my application or whatever it is, and then save it. If it doesn't work, again, you raise an exception, and then you save your Boolean value. So it's got all of the functionality of an ini file, but you're doing it to the registry. I don't like using the registry, and the reason is that I found over the years that if a IT department is going to restrict something, it's nearly always access to the registry. And the reason is that it's a security risk, because if you can write to the registry and get to certain keys in the registry, you can change the functionality of Windows, because a lot of the functionality is controlled by registry settings. So, you've got to be a little bit careful about what you're doing. I'm just going to start some of the questions because we've got some really good questions coming up, and I'll come back to those in a minute. There you go. Right. So, yeah, registry works fine. And the same is when you're reading it. Is that the same slide? Have I made a mistake there? I think I might have duplicated the slide a bit there, but there you go. Let me check. Hang on. Reg open key. Right. Yeah. So one's write and one's read. So the read, see, I wasn't crazy after all. So the read of the key is similar. It's a little bit more involved because you've got to make sure that when you're reading that the key exists. And then once you've read that value, you can then use it again. So in this case, my app would actually store my dark mode yes or no value on an area of the registry, and then be able to retrieve it later on like that. So the code to write it is this, and the code to read it is this. Now, great stuff, but a pain in the neck, because there's lots of little gotchas that you have to watch out for, and you want to try and avoid those if you can. So there is one of the best resources I found. I'm going to go through a couple of resources now. One of them is by a guy called Chris Rolliston. I think he's moved on to doing something different now, because I used to know Chris back in the day, vaguely, and it's called prefs inifile. And if you go to that URL, tinyurl.com/cr prefs ib, that's one of my shortened things, you can download that repository, and it's got a class in there that will actually store and retrieve your settings on anything. So it is quite old. It's 9 years old, but actually it's backwardly compatible. And I did take a look at it. I thought I might have seen a bug to do with Mac, and I need to come back and check that, and I will do that. And probably, if it is a bug, I'll fork the repo and fix it, and then update the tiny URL to point to it. But if not, then great. It's a class that's been around for a long time, and other people have looked at it and commented on it as well. So I'm guessing it does a good job. But Chris Rolliston's prefs inifile will allow you to store preferences on iOS, Android, Windows, Linux, and macOS using effectively the same piece of code. It's very good. The other thing to know about is Microsoft's reference. And that's actually quite important. The reason is that if you go to that tiny URL that I've got there, it's going to take you a while to read through it, because it is a bit long-winded, a bit like myself. But it does explain where you should store things, and they're called known folders. So, for example, you should never try and open a user's documents folder just using /my documents, because even though that's what you can see in Windows Explorer, that doesn't exist. That's not a real folder. It's actually somewhere completely different. So using the tpath and the tfile classes from Rad Studio, from Delphi and C++ Builder, you can access these known folders in Windows very, very easily. And because some of them are cross-platform, and they do say which ones work and which ones don't, they'll actually work on any operating system as well. Dave Schudel asks, if you're writing an app that only runs on Windows, is using the registry the preferred way? It is, I think, a judgment call, but I would say no. And again, it's really down to whether people have got access to the parts of the registry you're trying to write to. It also depends on whether you're going to work in a corporate environment where Windows Store apps, for example, might be banned or highly restricted. I personally find it easier to use ini files. The reason is when you back up the app, you're backing up the ini file. if you use the registry, you've got to know which part of the registry to make a backup. Now, let's say you have a problem with Windows, or you want to install the app on another machine. You could install the app on another machine if you allowed it, copy over all of the data, let's say it's a database or something like that, but because you've stored the settings in a registry setting kind of scenario, you can't copy that over easily. And the only way that you can do that is if you know what the registry setting is. If it's an ini file or a .dat file, it doesn't matter what you call it. You could call it my monkey, or it doesn't matter. But if it's a physical file and someone makes a backup of where your data is, it's a lot easier because the files can just be ported around and off they go. So it's up to you. Most Microsoft applications will store things in the registry, but they would do that, wouldn't they? But I think that if you're wanting to go for the maximum portability and the maximum convenience, then I would suggest you use an ini file or a DAT file. That's just my personal preference. It's up to you. Anyway, so helpful resources. Microsoft reference the the definitive guide to what folders you should or shouldn't be using. Other helpful resources. There is a blog by one of our tech partners, Softicom, who do blog. Yes, Peter Gore says, using the registry, you lose portability. Yes, I actually agree. It makes it harder to move things around on people's machines. Some helpful resources, an Embarcadero blog entry by Softicom. And if you go to tinyurl.com/settings blog IB, then this is a slightly older article, but it's still pretty valid. And they just talk about pretty much all the things I've just been talking about right now. Very good. So let's go to the Q&A. And for that, I think I will stop sharing my screen. Actually, yeah, before we go to the Q&A, let's actually do something else. I'm going to go get rid of this. So I'm still sharing my screen, hopefully. Yes, I am. So let's just show a bit of code for a second. So here's a little app. Okay. It doesn't do much. Don't get too excited. But the only thing it's got on there is a thing that says dark mode. And it's a toggle switch. And if you click it one way, it says dark. And if you click it the other way, it says light, I think. And you can control that. This is Windows control, but it's caption off or caption on. And you can find it on the palette. I'll come back to the form size thing in a moment. Okay. And that's all it does. Now, what happens when it runs? Well, when it runs, if I do that now, hopefully it will run on this setup. Yes, it will. If I click on here, doom, it goes light. And if I click on here, it goes dark again. You've seen this before. Those of you that have been to the webinar, you know exactly how this works. Now, what is it doing? Well, when the app runs, the first thing it does, it goes into the create event, and it just says, "Oh, is there dark mode? Is dark mode not enabled?" And if it isn't, and then it will set the light theme, and that's the only thing it does. Now, when I click on this toggle here, the click event occurs. So the first thing it does is it looks at what the value is of the toggle switch, and if it's on, then it shows a dark theme, and if it's off, it shows a light theme. And this is from a piece of my own code called Windows Dark Mode. You can go to my GitHub and you can download this, and all this does is just check some settings and make sure that dark mode or light mode is enabled on Windows, and will set your dark mode for your app in there. I think I've shown this before. So yeah, the toggle switch does that. But the only other thing it does is it saves whatever the setting of that toggle, that on-off switch is set to, and it saves it to here. Okay, So the section looks like this, memory, okay, and then the item is that dark mode, and then switch. Now let's go into here and say just run this so that we know where it's going. So it will only trigger when something changes, and so it's putting it in users app data roaming / settings test 1. Okay, so if I open that, I'm going to do it on my own machine so you can't see all my goodies. User / in / I can actually cheat. There is a way of cheating on Windows to do this. Roaming / what would you call it? Settings test. Settings test 1. Okay, so if I open that path like this is Windows 11 latest version. That's the folder that gets created automatically from the code, and in there is this ini file. Okay, and I'm just going to put it over here because I need to make sure I'm showing anything that shouldn't. Hide that, people won't get it. And there's the ini file. So an ini file has a section, a item, and then the value. Okay. Now the section is determined because I've got it set in this this constant here, and it's exactly as you would expect. I pull up that ini file, and then when I want to save it, I literally save it. I say save it to that section, save it to that value, and save the value of the switch. And the value of the switch is either on or off. And because it's a Boolean, it will, if it's off, it will be 0, and if it's on, it will be 1. So let's just close that and carry on running the app. Clicking OK. Now, if I click on dark mode and close it again, and then open it up, it should now be a 0. Oh, do wrong. Something stupid. Let's check. Mode light. Oh, maybe I've got a bug in my program. Well, maybe I've got a bug. That doesn't really matter. The principle's still the same. Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah. So light mode, it means off. Yeah, of course it is. You get the general gist of it. Oh, I just zoom that up. You can see what it is. So that's it, really. Nothing particularly special. Like I say, if you want the special stuff, then I would definitely recommend Chris Warrington's version, because it's actually very, very good. He's asking about the Windows theme location, Peter Pan. Before you tell people that, I should point out you should use API tools for that, and for dark mode. The reason is that sooner or later Microsoft can change that registry setting, and Peter says the file is still open, doesn't open in Notepad. Actually, not true. What happens is when you open that and when I free it here, what will happen is it will do an update. It's just the way that custom ini file works. So I save that setting. Then when I say free, at that point it will then save it. So sorry, on here it will save it. So because I'm actually writing the save into the ini file, that's when it will save it back again. So yeah, and a few other things. Well, anyway, you get the general idea. So let's stop sharing. Instead, enable my camera and come back in. Hello. Right. So what we doing? Oh, wow! Now at the top of the hour already. So Peter said this is the Windows theme location, and then showed this. That is correct. If you use the Delphi dark mode, it's a lot easier. If you're going to support dark mode properly, the other thing you should do is support a desktop settings change, which is a message that gets sent from Windows when someone changes dark mode to light mode. It's not as easy as it looks, but you need to track that. That's not really what we're talking about. really we're talking about the settings today and where to save them. The file is still open and doesn't update on Notepad. Yes, I just point out it's incorrect. I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me, my mistake. Ask others asking questions. Hey, Ed, I'll be here as long as you've got questions. I'll keep going. It's not a problem. And Nigel says, sorry about all the chat. Hey, no problem. Do more. We're all here for the benefit of it. What strategy would you use for passwords? Good question. And in fact, I actually ran out of time. I was going to show people storing encrypted sections in there. The advice I would give is there is a let me just see if I can pull it up and get it. Crypt. That's the one I'm looking for. Yeah. So let me just share my screen again so I can show you, which is this one. Like so. Oh, that's weird that I'm kind of super invisible there, but if you go into Get It, so go to Tools, Get It Now, and type in Crypt. There's a thing called the Delphi Encryption Compendium, which we use. There are some settings in there. There are some items in there that will allow you to encrypt things like passwords and store them as ASCII. So text that can be stored in the file. Failing that, you can store it in a binary file. I didn't cover things like saving it as JSON and encoding it as JSON, but you could do that. There's also a few other ways of doing things as well, but the Delphi Encryption and Compendium is up to date. It was updated in March, and it was very, very comprehensive. We've got all sorts of exciting things on it for people that need to do stuff. It is a pain when passwords change, but if you store it in the INI file and it's encrypted, then that works. However, you should never, ever store the actual password. And first of all, it should be salted anyway, and this kind of goes beyond what we're talking about. But the storing of passwords is a bad idea. You should store the hash and then compare against hashes, and then you should encrypt the hash so that you are never storing anything that's obvious. The only trouble you have is that if you have it on a machine, you want it to not work when they put it on another machine. And in the past, the way I've done that is based on fingerprinting the machine. So taking a snapshot of various values on the machine, and then using that to actually be embedded in the password that's stored, so that if someone goes and puts it on another machine, I retrieve the name and other settings of the machine, compare that to the new machine they're running on, and refuse to use the password if the two things don't match up. There are libraries and tools that will do this for you, and I would say that do that. Barton says Lockbox is easy to use. Yes, I absolutely agree. Lockbox. You've got to be mindful that someone may take your program, clone it, and put it on another PC and clone it. Nowadays, you can make Docker images of things, and your apps will struggle to know that they're running in a virtual environment. There are ways of detecting VMware and I can't remember the other technologies, VNC, and a few others as well. And I actually do it in my own programs because there's one that the customer doesn't want to run in a VM, and we detect it, but there's some VMs you will never detect. I use Google Remote Desktop, and it's very good, and it's very difficult to tell that it's running in an environment. As Peter says, use the TPM, Trusted Platform Module. Yes. And the other thing I wanted to talk about as well is third-party components. Okay, so let's just go back to share my screen for a second, because why not? and do this, click share, and then I'll leave myself on. You can see this particular component here as well, called T form size. And if I go down to here and say independent form size, it's from TMS. Okay, there are others as well, but I just happen to choose the TMS one. What this does is this actually stores the position and location and size of your forms, and it's a very nice component. It works very well. And Stephen's going, bye, Stephen, and is off to Bride. Okay, good luck. I know what he means by that. Yeah, it stores the settings in a very sort of elegant sort of way, and then makes your app restore in the right place. So you know, it's definitely worth having. And one of the MVPs is messaging now and telling him to go away. But yeah, form size, so that once your app runs, as mine does, because I've got the form size component on there, it will actually appear on this screen. Now, this screen I'm on at the moment is not my main screen, because I have this a smaller resolution screen for streaming, and my main screen is over that way, and is a 3K, I think a 4K monitor or something like that. And I'm streaming on a 4K camera at the moment, which is why I'm shiny. But the form size just means that app stays in the right place for me, because normally by default the Windows will make it appear on the master monitor that's got the toolbar, the Windows start bar, the taskbar. But that little app just makes that appear in the right place. And it was a happy accident. I forgot I'd put it on there. I was looking at how they did some things to talk about the benefits of Registry versus something else, and I'm like, oh, that's why it works on there. So very, very good. So that's it. So good stuff. Let's Ambridge, yes. Means nothing to anybody who's not a Brit, but it means that he's off to partake in a certain British soap opera about farm life. It's a long story. Peter Pan is replying to people in Russian, and because I don't speak Russian, I'm afraid I'm not going to put the answer up. Guys, if you could use, I know, you know, you're all there, but if you could use English, that would be handy so everybody can understand. I know it's probably not your first language, it's harder, but if we, on the chat, if we stick to English, then it's kind of the, and I apologize because I am obviously English, but it's just nearly all the people can translate it relatively well and understand what's going on. But are you aware that if an emergency close of the program occurs while saving the settings to this file, the file will be damaged before the settings you want to save? Not with an ini file, actually. Saving the settings to an ini file, it doesn't work like that. So it's not great, but it will work. I have apps out there that are used by tens of thousands of people, not hundreds of thousands, I don't think, but certainly tens of thousands of people. And we store setting files all the time, and it's the one thing that doesn't get corrupted. What we do occasionally come across is someone's IT department have configured the folder access and the folder inheritance and read and write permissions badly, and you can't write the settings back. And it should be able to. So, you know, they've locked down their personal folders in a way that means that nothing works. And actually, they normally come and say on support, "Oh, you know, I can't save my settings. It doesn't remember my setting." And when we go and look into it, nothing works, nothing at all. The Windows Store apps quite often do work because of the way they're installed. They're installed in kind of like their own little what's the word I'm looking for? Like a sandbox, they call it, and so they have a tendency to work a little bit better. But it has its own problems, you know. The Windows Store thing. What else have we got? Lots of Russian comments. Roman Golomnikov. Okay, yes, you can view the replay. All the replays are available on the web, and we can actually put a QR code up here. Let's put a QR code up. If you go to here to the blog, when I get a chance, I put the replay from the webinar up and also the slides as well. Sometimes it takes me a few days, sometimes about a week, just depending on what happens. I moved house and my whole life is in chaos as a result. But so it took me a little bit longer with the other ones, but normally it's the next day or the same day. But just go to that. That's the Embarcadero main blog, and you can get to the replays. Chris Rollinson's repo that I talked about, if you scan that, that's the one with the cross-platform preferences file, which is very, very good. Oh, look, my chair's glitching. Probably needs a brighter light on it or something. We go to there, and someone's scanning it. That's good. And what else have we got? And the if you want to download a trial in the latest version and do some of the things I did, the cool things I did, then scan that QR code, that QR code, that one, that QR code there, and it'll take you to the product page, and then you can download a free trial as well. It's up to you. That's what else have we got? And and the other thing that I mentioned but didn't actually go ahead and do anything about was the DelphiSummit.com. If you're in Europe and you can get to it, then you should probably go to the Delphi Summit, because it's going to be amazing, and I should certainly be around. There you go. Your current name on screen is Vladimir. Not me, someone else. What? My current name on screen? No, not my current name on screen. I think he's talking to someone in the chat and saying that their name on screen is that. It'd be confusing otherwise if my name was Vladimir. I'm not that schizophrenic that I'm aware of. Yeah, really upset. Okay, all right. Well, I think I've answered all the questions. Lockbox, etc., etc. We talked about those. If there's one takeaway from this, it's this: try not to store things in the registry if you really value portability. In other words, having your application stored in one place and then someone copies it over to somewhere else. It is something the RAD Studio IDE does. It stores things in the registry, and actually, it is one of the most common things where someone says X or Y is not working, and the first thing we do is have to give them some instructions on how to edit a registry setting, which I think is not intuitive for new people, and it's quite dodgy, because if you get it wrong, you can corrupt your registry, your Windows Hive or your Windows registry, and all hell breaks loose once you've done that. Store it default if you can. Do not store passwords in plain text, and if you can, do not store passwords at all. Encrypt them and salt the encryption so that you're not using the default encryption. Use Lockbox and the decrypt things that I showed you on Get It to save those settings in files and have them encrypted. Read up on best practices for how to store or not store passwords. You should always be using password hashes, not actual passwords. Peter said about the app data folder always allow you to write to it. You say that, but actually, Peter, I know of some corporates that lock that down. One of my customers is an embassy, and they are very security conscious, and they freak out. What he's talking about, if I just share my screen for one more second, one more time, this one. What he's talking about is if you, I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you do this in your Explorer window, it will actually take you to the app data folder. It's just the way that these environment program data is the other one. If you type in program data and do this, you'll go to here. Now you can store things in program data as well. I would recommend that. I'm not sharing properly. Let me just show you that again. So what you can do is you can go app data like this, type that in, and it will take you to your app data folder. If instead you want to go to one of the other well-known folders, choose program data, like that, and it'll take you automatically to the program folder. Now these are virtualized on many customers' machines. Yeah, Nigel, you're not shared. Yeah, I'll fix that. Sorry, I wasn't really paying attention. Too busy worrying about how long my beard has got in the 2 or 3 weeks that I have not been able to shave. But yes, those variables they work pretty well for you. If you want to know where they come from, let me just see if I can do this without exposing anything untoward. Yeah, I can't do it. Yeah, I can't do it. I was going to show you that it basically, if you go to the command line and type in set, you'll come up with the environment variables, and it will show you where that is, because all that percentage shine that where you type in this data like this is an environment variable, and it gets translated into that, and you can see the value of where it is. But these are some of the places where you should be thinking about storing things. Like I say, go to the Microsoft site that I told you about, and the well-known folders thing, which is this one here, and it'll tell you what those folders do, what ones are safe, what ones aren't safe. Most of them are safe unless you're in a corporate environment and someone's done something wrong or weird, because they shouldn't lock down things like app data. It's one of those folders where it should work, but I can tell you for certain that some people do, and it drives me crazy. Okay, all right. I think I've answered everybody's questions, and we are like hour and 15 minutes into it. Next week is the last one in this current series. We'll be starting again later in June, because, like I say, I'm off to Amsterdam on the 14th and the 15th for the Delphi Summit, which is kind of cool and also slightly stressful because I've got to write 2 keynotes for it. And next week is going to be a fun one because it will probably be longer than normal, because I'm going to show you how to create complete checkout, grocery store checkout, where you can scan cans or whatever and have a cash drawer with probably Monopoly money in it, but maybe some real money. We'll see how it goes. And a receipt printer. I'll be printing receipts. So a real thing that will actually work. We'll have it doing light mode and dark mode, because that's important. And laying it out so that this same app will work on Windows and Linux and macOS and all the others. I think I'll probably only be demonstrating on Windows just because of the way the device is set up. But the app would work on anything because I'm going to use FireMonkey. And we're going to get my little robot. Hopefully my sword fighting robot, I'll manage to have found it and then assembled it, because my entire house is in boxes because we've moved and I've lost everything. And I'll find it. It's packed away. I wasn't very good at labeling where the important things were. And then finally, we're going to try and talk to a LoRa radio, but I'm having trouble sourcing one that has got the interface that we need. Looking at XMPP and a few other things as well. So maybe I can't do a LoRa radio, but we'll definitely do the sword fighting robot on the checkout unless something terrible happens. Okay. All right. Thanks to everybody. Say thank you. Well, what we got? Oh, lots and lots of people. Program data. Yes, as Peter Pan says, it's for services and you need elevated permissions. Yeah, the reason I know about program data is I write Windows services quite a lot, and so they tend to run with the necessary permissions for the folder they're writing into. You can't just create things that you want left, right, and centre. Dave says, take care. Thank you. Francis, hello, Francis. Says thanks. Siggy says hi. And Charlie Chambers and Thomas. Peter is around, and Paul as well, and all the others. I really appreciate you coming along because, just a general, sturdy, easy conversational thing that we're trying to do. I don't want to preach at you. I just want to try and unload some useful topics for you, hopefully, that you can make use of. And you may have known them already, and you may know more than what we talk about. But some of them, sometimes I touch on the subject. People go, "Oh, I didn't really know that." Peter says, "Hand big waving." Yeah, I didn't quite translate, but I know what you mean. And but it says bye bye. Okay, all right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, and we will see you. Let's have a look. Next week. Yes, I was just making sure next time, and then I'll see you in Amsterdam. Anyway, thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.